It's rare for a play's allegory to be as widely known as its actual story. Having been a staple on English lit reading lists since it was written in 1953, you may know The Crucible is based on the true story of the Salem witch trials of the 17th century, but it's equally as likely you'll know it as Arthur Miller's allegory for McCarthyism in 1950s America. There's also a chance you may think of it as about the McCarthy witch trials, set in 1950s America, allegorically. Such confusion is quite understandable if unhelpful. This widespread awareness of such metaphor behind the play means that any major new productions will reignite conversations about its relevance today. After all, history may change, but do humans. Nearly 7 decades later, we have director Lindsay Turner bringing her take to the National Theatre's Olivier. Though it doesn't pretend to be documentary, Miller himself said of the story that The Crucible is taken from history, and there's no character in the play who did not play a similar role in Salem in 1692. As it is the only source of knowledge many of us have of these times, it plays an important role in the telling of history. We know Abigail Williams was really one of the children who was first to accuse women of witchcraft. John Proctor did exist and defended the observed claims. The two did have an intimate relationship. In the play, Miller portrays Abigail as an unruly 17-year-old. She bullies, she lies, she tempts Proctor into sex, and his later rejection of her builds in her a vengeance that ultimately results in the hanging of innocent women. Conversely, John Proctor is shown as a good-hearted man in his mid-30s, an everyman who is flawed, like us all. But he is honest, despite his lies. He is loyal, aside from his adultery, and he is kind, apart from the violence he shows his women servants. Miller portrays her as a whore, and him as a martyr. We know for certain 2 changes that Miller made to the play. The real Abigail was 11, and the real Proctor was nearly 60. I'll just let that settle for a moment. That means the 60-year-old martyr was seduced by the 11-year-old whore, so he had no choice but to fuck her. It isn't too hard to imagine Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey and their chums all seeing a bit of themselves in good man John Proctor. You may therefore be wondering how Lindsay Turner uses this context to modernise the telling for 2022. She doesn't. Instead, she leaves the play as it is, but she wraps it in exquisite packaging. Designer Ez Devlin, Turner's longtime collaborator, has put Salem in a box. Its inhabitants are trapped in this insulated world with shining floor and lowered ceiling. Bound by the rules they created for their world, they will now become its victims. Opening and closing each act, water falls dramatically in sheets around 3 sides of this boxed world. There are plastic mats worn by those sitting in the front seats, so you can be pretty sure this isn't just a well-lit effect. Water is nothing new at the National Theatre. A similar curtain was seen in 2019's Rutherford and Son, and the climactic flooding was the highlight of 2021's Manor, though to be fair, the pleasure felt here was helped, as it marked the end of that disastrous play. Adding to the claustrophobia, the play is soundtracked by a one-note hum. It aches for a crescendo that never comes. And occasionally, areas upstage are softly lit to reveal the accused girls and the accusing of girls huddling. They plot, they plan, they harmonise with intent. The splendour of this wrapping only succeeds in building disappointment of its contents. Having clearly spent most of the budget flaunting the hosepipe ban, the rest of this set is pretty basic. Luckily, thanks to the reuse of many of the seats from the recent production of A Corn is Green, the set and stage isn't left unfurnished. In addition, many of the 27-strong cast remain on stage long after they have spoken their one or two lines. With repetitive circularity, actors appear from the horizon and canter down the steep rake into position. The downside of the surrounding rainfall is its removal of any other possible entrance point. The actors, after pausing for breath, it is a very steep rake, say their piece, and then shuffle back a few steps, where they stay until curtain or rain down. The result is demonstrations of many basic theatre techniques. We see how to group people in socially unnatural semicircles, how to react act so the audience doesn't focus on you, and conversely how to point act so the audience do focus on you. Such technical direction aims to improve the audience's sightlines, of course. However, due to the massive width of the Olivier Auditorium, only few will benefit from this. Many will just be left wondering where they are to look. If this happens, my advice is to follow the pointing arms. As they rise and fall, the one whose arm is rising is the one who is speaking. It's like watching a game of catch played with invisible balls. With so many scenes populated in this way, it seems that getting the nuts and bolts right of staging has dominated rehearsals. Sadly, it has left little time to do other things such as build character depth or create cohesion in the cast. We, of course, know Erin Doherty is adept at playing characters with multi-layers. In The Crown, she brought a vulnerability to the usually guarded Princess Anne. In the identity theft drama Chloe, her character was manipulative and at times scary, yet you still wanted to give her a hug. Her Abigail Williams is as strong as you would expect, but there are no layers here. There is no chance of us thinking of her as the victim. Doherty's Abigail has villain written large upon her head. There is no softness in her pleas with Proctor. They hint at lust, but not love. Time may have passed since the fornication, but it's difficult to understand how it could ever really have happened. Well, apart from there being an old man who wanted to have sex with a minor. But this production is no place for such thoughts. As for John Proctor, he seems to hail from a very different part of America to the rest of the townsfolk. Brendan Cowell has given him an elongated, drawled accent that appears to have come from New Jersey or by an as yet undiscovered Australia. But it's not his accent that really takes your attention. As Proctor's life crumbles and his world breaks down around him, Cowell physically represents the mental impact this has on him, not for him the internal playing of turmoil. He shows the pain he feels with a physicality that at times borders on interpretive dance. He stumbles around the stage as though his body is reacting to a sudden gravitational surge. His knees bend deeply as he walks, his arms stretch down like he's been handed the bags of invisible balls. As we watch him lunge and grab Mary Warren and force her deposition, it's like watching a drunken Hulk in a blindfold. The addition of a prologue and epilogue package the events as though they're a recounting of history, with text broken and delivered by the accusatory girls, but as their actor selves. It first feels like a Shakespeare chorus. The text they use is taken from Miller's original prologue, and his later written essay echoes down the corridor. They weren't written as dialogue, so the words sound more like they should be read as subtitles, perhaps. They first set context, explain where we are, and then finally tell us what happens next to the characters. Recognisable from the structure of the many true crime dramas, and that's when it strikes you. This is less Shakespearean, more Netflixian. And this really sums up what we have here. It's a good story that we know, but it's been remade. It's a tale we've been told before and will be told again, but we don't mind watching. The telling is adequate and the packaging is pretty. There are some good production values. For anyone who has Miller on their A-level reading list this year, it can't harm a study aid. I can imagine papers benefiting from debates about the staging and what it means. I can't imagine anything new being added to these papers that they learn from the performances. Is this enough? Has Turner missed a trick in her interpretation? Like Salem, I'll let you be the judge.